Good morning, warriors. Today is Tuesday, May 5th, 2026. It is time to wake up the warrior. Hey, as we get rolling today, let me ask you a question. Who told you who you are? And did you believe them? Think about that. Most people never question their subconscious programmed identity. So you might hear something, experience something, or repeat something. And eventually you accept it as who you are at your core. Now, look what happens when a story becomes who you are. Most people never question the story. They just live from it. And when life starts to feel restricted, they don't look inward, they look outward. They call it oppression, maybe marginalization, being overlooked, being misunderstood. And sometimes pressure, I'm not discounting it, pressure is real. Sometimes bias exists. Systems can be flawed. Pain will leave marks. But here's where it all shifts. Instead of confronting reality with strength, many people convert circumstance into identity. They move from this happened to me to this is who I am. And once that happens, everything around you changes because it doesn't stop with victimhood. Some people build identity around money, around status or pleasure, fear, anxiety, anger, trauma, or maybe even around indulgence. Different stories with the same outcome. Because the moment something becomes identity, it defines your ceiling. You stop aiming for extraordinary. You settle into average, or you quietly drift toward despair. But here's what most people never hear. What was allowed can be dismantled. What was internalized can be reprogrammed. And before we're done today, I'm going to show you how to reclaim your God-given identity and build something disciplined, powerful, and intentional. So don't go away. This is key. This could change your life. But first, we need to expose the walls. So let's call this exactly and actually what it is. Today's episode is called You're Living in the Prison That You Yourself Built. You're living in the prison you built. And let's define that correctly. Society may have handed you some bricks. Culture may have suggested a blueprint. Experiences may have delivered the materials, but none of it becomes you unless you agree to it. External forces can apply pressure. They cannot define you without your permission. Internal pulses can pull. They cannot command unless you surrender authority, though. See, you built the prison, not because you created every wall, but because you allowed certain labels, fears, indulgences, and narratives to become your identity. And once something becomes identity, you start to protect it and to nurture it. You defend it, explain it, live inside of it, even when it's keeping you playing very small in life or in business or in relationships or in your faith. So today we separate influence from ownership because influence is real, but identity is your choice. It's chosen. And by the end of this episode, you're going to know how to tear it down and replace it with something stronger, that old identity with a new power identity, rooted in discipline, responsibility, faith, and purpose. So let me ask you something. You probably haven't asked yourself honestly this question. So here's the question of the day. Are you living from truth or from a story you've repeated long enough to actually believe it? Because repetition is what creates your identity, not truth. If you've told yourself something long enough about your past, your limits, your personality, your circumstances, your mind stops questioning it. It just accepts it. And once it's accepted into your mind, you start living from it. This identity that's not even you, that was installed, programmed into your subconscious mind, that's keeping you small, making you make decisions from it. You explain your entire life through it. So ask yourself, is the way you see yourself actually true? Or is it just familiar? Because familiarity can feel like truth even when it's keeping you stuck. So let's now separate this clearly. Not all identity distortion, let's call it identity distortion. Not all identity distortion comes from the same place. Some of it is external, things that are placed on you. Some of it is internal, things you've allowed to take root. Different sources, same outcome, end result, a restricted life. So let's get into the 4 personal prisons you may find yourself trapped in and break this down into where it actually goes wrong so we know how to fix it at the end. Let's start with number 1, what the world puts on you. Yeah, external forces exist. Race, skin color, gender, cultural expectations, social narratives. These are real things, especially in today's society, but they're not your identity unless you allow it. See, here's where it breaks. You take something external, like what we just talked about, and make it internal, make it who you are. You move from this is around me, this is the world, to this is me, this is who I am. And once that shift happens, everything changes. Now you interpret your life through limitation. You scan for injustice. Sound familiar? Seeing that anywhere? You measure opportunity through doubt. You start building a case for why you can't do it, whatever it is. And over time, you actually believe yourself. See, you can't live an extraordinary life playing a role of the victim. Again, not because challenges don't exist, but because victimhood removes your personal responsibility. And then responsibility disappears, and so does power. And all of a sudden, you're powerless. The external forces have you. See, freedom isn't found in perfect conditions. It's found in personal command. Outside influence of the world is inevitable. Identification with those forces, with the world, is optional. It's your choice. It's your personal autonomy. You don't control those outside forces. You don't control what's projected on you, but you fully control what you internalize. And once you internalize limitation, you start living inside it. Now, some people reject that, but fall into something just as limiting. They don't identify as victims. They identify through what they have. Number 2, identifying through what you have: money, status, possessions, recognition, control. This all looks like power, a power identity, a leader, but it's not. It's conditional. Because now your identity is tied to something external. And anything external can be lost. It can be taken. It can be stripped. It can be transferred. So now you're protecting it, performing for it, comparing through it, measuring yourself constantly. That, my friends, is not power. That is pressure, external pressure. Real power is handled internally. You control it. Because external success without internal stability creates fragility. You can look successful and still be completely insecure. You can have status and still lack identity, character, charisma, charm. If it can be taken from you, it cannot define you. You cannot allow it to define you. So now you've got two prisons, victim identity and ego identity. Different appearance, completely same instability. So let's say it's not the ego and it's not the world. Then we have to start to look inward. Number 3, this is where control is fully yours. And this is where most people give it away, not to society, to impulse. Pleasure becomes your priority. Comfort becomes your default. And discipline now becomes optional. And slowly, identity shifts. You stop being someone who enjoys things and become someone controlled by them. That's the shift. The body starts leading, but the body was never meant to lead. The body is just the vessel. It's not your command center. See, when impulses dictate behavior, discipline now starts to disappear. And without discipline, there is no structure. Without structure, there is no growth. You don't build a powerful life chasing comfort. You build it by commanding your actions. Because every time you give in without intention, you reinforce weakness as identity. And once weakness becomes identity, consistency feels unnatural. Control feels exhausting. And that, again, is not freedom. That is complete 100% dependence. And number 4, deeper than behavior is the story running in your mind. This is the quietest prison because it sounds reasonable. I'm just anxious. I overthink. I'm not confident. I've always been like this. I work better under pressure. I've got a bad temper. See, these sound like observations, but they're not. They're identity statements. And once you label yourself that way, you stop challenging it and you start to operate from it. So fear now becomes your filter. Anxiety becomes your baseline. Procrastination becomes your pattern, and anger becomes the response to it all. But here's the good news. None of that is actually who you are. It's what you've created yourself to be. It's what it's what your mind has allowed in to create. These are just conditions. And again, the good news is that conditions can be changed, but not if you protect them. What you label as identity, you stop trying to fix. So when you say, this is just who I am, you've already given up control. And when control is gone, all growth stops. Because the mind is only going to follow what it believes. And the body executes what the mind accepts. So your identity is built now on limitation. And your life is going to reflect limitation perfectly. So there's the 4 prisons that you're probably living under, at least one, if not all 4. So what does a correct identity actually look like? Let's turn the corner here, because this is now where we rebuild. Because if you tear down a false identity and replace it, or don't replace it, even worse, you don't replace it, you fall right back into it. So this all has to be intentional. A God-given identity is not built on labels. It's not built on race. It's not built on status. It's not built on your past. And it's certainly not built on your emotions. It's built on responsibility. And it sounds like this. I am disciplined. I am accountable. I execute regardless of how I feel. I have gritty. I execute regardless of how I feel. It doesn't matter. I have motivated discipline, gritty. I build, I don't blame. I operate from faith, not fear. I do what is required. That, friends, is identity. Not motivation. That's not what we're talking about here, but actual structure. Because identity is the standard you operate from without negotiation. And when the standard is correct, Discipline now becomes the norm. Consistency from yourself is now expected, and execution becomes automatic. Listen to this carefully. You don't rise to your goals. I wish we did. I set a goal, and as long as I set the goal, I'm going to rise to it. That's not how it works. We would all be crushing goals. But you do fall to identity. So your identity better be sky high. If your identity is weak, your results will reflect it. But when identity is strong, behavior follows without that resistance. And I want you to understand this clearly. It's really important. Your body does not decide. Your mind commands your body, and your soul defines the person that you are. If your identity is misaligned, your mind will justify weakness, and your body is going to execute it. But when identity is aligned, the mind sharpens, the body follows. That is your control. That is where your power comes from. Now, here's where most people actually get it wrong, though. They hear this and try to act like the version of themselves. You know the old fake it till you make it thing? It doesn't work. Not long term. It might give you temporary relief. It doesn't work long term. There's no transformation. There's no subconscious programming and fake it till you make it. So you might push for a few days. You rely on motivation. You try harder, and then you fall right back because behavior without identity never actually lasts. So the real question is, how do you actually change identity? Not temporarily, permanently. And so this is where Sisu Vida identity shifting becomes the difference maker. Sisu Vida is not about motivation. We don't care about motivation. It's a system. Because identity is not changed through willpower. It's changed at the subconscious level. So here's what Sisu Vida does. We remove the internal resistance that keeps you tied to that old identity. We rewire the pattern of this is who I am into this is how I operate. There's no force, no constant self-talk, no burnout cycles, just pure alignment. Because when resistance is clear and gone, execution becomes natural. You no longer fight yourself. You start to move with intention. And then you give that identity structure. Because identity without structure now drifts. So this is where the Sisu Vida identity roadmaps create value. The roadmaps give you clear direction on how to change that identity, how to create a power identity that is unshakable with defined standards. And the roadmaps give you step-by-step execution. So you're not guessing who to be. You're building who you want to be, who you were born to be, your God-given identity on a daily basis. With intention, with clarity, with consistency. Listen, you've spent enough time living inside limits that you have accepted. That ends now. Because the same mind that agreed to the prison is the same mind that has the ability to tear it down. And the same person who settled can rebuild with intention. No more labels, no more excuses, no more identifying yourself and tying yourself to weakness. You don't need permission to change your life. All you need is ownership and the right tools to make it happen. Work your body, feed your mind, build your soul, wake up the warrior. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Stuck in your mind, fighting shadows of a story you left behind.